Howdy, and welcome to the Pentarchy of Blood Mega Cut. This is just going to be a very quick intro, I promise. It won't take long. Having concluded the Pentarchy of Blood series on my channel, I decided to edit them all together into a single video, mainly to satisfy the viewers of my longer content. It's really nothing fancy, it's just sticking the videos together ass to ass in video editor and hitting render with some minor edits to kind of smooth some transitions. If you've seen the series before, there's not going to be much new here for you, but for those looking to watch the whole series, all 5 videos together, you won't have to hit a button to move to the next one or anything. In the Pentarchy of Blood series, I had one intro kind of copy and pasted across all 5 videos. That was mainly as an experiment, but for now I'm just going to play it once in the beginning, and then you won't see it again. I'm not going to repeat it because that'd be dumb. With that in mind, I hope you enjoy the video. If you've seen the videos before, enjoy them again, I guess. I ain't forcing you to watch it, but I do appreciate it. But yeah, enjoy. Deep within the Segmentum Pacificus, to the galactic west of Holy Terra, an event known as the War of the False Primarch saw the 33rd millennium plunged into war. Little is known about the true events of this conflict, being a minor footnote in Games Workshop's expansive history of the Warhammer 40k universe, but not all has been lost to the ravages of time and censure. While the identity of the false Primarch is unknown, they succeeded in rousing chaos and rebellion in the sector, biting back against the hand of the Greater Imperium. The High Lords of Terra saw fit to task the Adeptus Astartes in the suppression of the false Primarch and inducted 5 Space Marine chapters into a holy fraternity dubbed the Pentarchy of Blood. The Carcharodons, the Flesh Eaters, the Red Talons, the Death Eagles, and the Charnel Guard saw to the sector running red with traitor blood over the next 80 years, eventually leading to the false Primarchs slain and their name purged from history itself. In this video series, I'll be going into the 5 chapters of the Pentarchy of Blood, some being more famous in the eyes of the fandom, and some a little more obscure.
Cigarettes. Cigarette. Cigarette.
The Carcharodons, more formally known as Carcharodons Outtro, or informally as the Space Sharks, are a Space Marine chapter shrouded in an air of mystery within the 40k universe, but are probably one of the more well-known chapters I've covered here on the channel. In a more meta sense, the Space Sharks are actually some of 40k's oldest Space Marines, having been proudly featured in the original Rogue Trader rulebooks back in 1987. Albeit with a different appearance from their modern incarnation. Born from an unknown founding, Imperial scribes have had great difficulty exacting the true origins and existence of this chapter, as no records of their activities are ever disclosed by the chapter. The only evidence to their background sits within files sealed and secured by none other than the Inquisition themselves. So, yeah, it may as well just not exist, really. The broken and censured records suggest many different reasons for their founding, from an ancient event known as the Astropath Wars, whose details begin and end at the name of Astropath Wars, to a shaky connection to the Mythos Angelica Mortis, an ancient treaty establishing the Astartes Praeses, which I recently did a video on actually, if you hadn't seen it. The Space Shark's true genetic lineage is also heavily guarded.
Who is your daddy, and what does he do?
Although there is conjecture drawn from clues that suggest that they were born from the gene stock of Corvus Corax, Primarch of the Raven Guard. Their combat doctrine is very similar to the Sons of Corax, and their chapter master is known as the Shade Lord, the same title used by Arcus Fall, who was a great commander during the Great Crusade of the Raven Guard, who was eventually exiled. However, nothing has been proven, and due to their general movement patterns, the Imperium determined that the risk of obtaining that information heavily outweighs whatever kind of revelations may come from the ordeal. After all, if you spend a couple 100 years trying to find a fleet of ships in the middle of the abyss and find, 1,000 very cranky Astartes led by a man with chainsaws for hands. It's probably not worth the trouble. Don't worry about it, guys. The space sharks' general aloofness falls down to the fact that they operate very differently from standard Space Marine operations. The sharks patrol from the very edge of known space and beyond, commonly being so far from Imperial space that many don't know of their existence at all, just from sheer distance. When they see a threat or are summoned from the void, they attack their foes in one of two ways depending on the situation. Either from stealth, sneaking as close as possible to their enemy's vitals before striking, or with a blitzkrieg ambush from an exposed flank, overwhelming their foes with sheer power. The methodology is very similar to the Raven Guard, and the comparison to a shark hunting its prey should also be pretty obvious here, but then again, as previously stated, Games Workshop has never been known for their subtlety. Then again, if you do have the administrative power to have a bunch of sharks at your command, I guess you do reserve the right to operate them as you see fit.
Sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads.
With their propensity to strike so quickly and with such ferocity from the remote reaches of space, the space sharks are frequently beyond the reaches of Imperial resupply lines. This sees to them salvaging arms and materials from wherever they can, favoring equipment that's easy to repair and upkeep. It's common to see their battle brothers adorned in a mix of varying marks of power armor. In particular, a very popular choice was the Mark V Heresy pattern armor, which was held together by and equipped with extra molecular bonding studs, which quickly saw to the Mark V becoming a staple in keeping the Space Shark's armory operable due to the ease of repair. If you need a new pauldron and something is vaguely metal, just flex seal it on. Good as new. Speaking of their appearance, the Carcharodons' uniform is a dark gray with black on the pauldron fields, very similar to some chapters like the Relictors. Something wholly unique to the Carcharodons, though, is the influence of the real-world Maori people on their chapter identity, usually accredited mostly to Robbie McNivens, who authored a book series for the chapter. I'm not buying another ebook just to verify that. I told you, I don't read these books after I buy them. It's just a waste of money. So the source on this is just going to have to be Just Trust Me, or It Was Revealed to Me in a Dream, or my favorite.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
The Maori people are known for their eye-catching tattoos, and the Carcharodons have inherited the same ornamentation, both on their skin and on their armor. In-universe, this is usually referred to as exile markings, giving even further credence to their heritage as exiled Raven Guard descendants. Another one of the Space Shark's most notable traits is, actually the lack of one. The Carcharodons have no battle cry, no theme songs, not even a catchphrase. In fact, they're known for the eerie silence that surrounds them. In combat, they stay completely silent, the quiet only broken to give or receive orders. No grunts, heaves, or even an oddly sexual Dark Souls 1 hurt sound effect. It's exactly the one you're thinking about, but don't worry, I'm not going to play. This complete lack of sound even translates to their life aboard their nomadic fleet, the hulls of their battle barges being dead silent. Many space sharks pass the time in quiet prayer or simply opt into cryosleep, a fact that may contribute to the long lifespans many of their ranks seem to have. While the Carcharodons' origins may be shrouded in secrecy, their deeds and accomplishments are Herculean. In fact, I have revised this part of the script multiple times to try and condense them into a reasonable size because it was getting way out of control and the script is already long enough, trust me. The Space Sharks were large contributors in conflicts such as the Battle of Zartak fighting against the Night Lords, the War in the Deeps against the Tyranid Menace, and the Solar Rebellions suppressing Chaos Uprisings alongside their future Pentarchy of Blood inductees, the Death Eagles. One notable contribution from the Sharks that I want to mention was during the early days of the Angevin Crusade, the time when the Imperium was pushing into what would later become known as the Segmentum Obscurus in the Galactic North. A rogue traitor named Basil Horothus took to the world of Loth to strike against Dark Eldar pirates that were roaming the area, yet found him and his crew in the heart of the Hornet's nest. Their ship, the Stark Venture, had crashed on the planet, covered in endless storms and an unending night. There, Basil and his men stood their ground for a month, repelling Dark Eldar slavers and corsairs. As the Dark Eldar seized their position, the distress beacon was finally answered by silent, hulking monstrosities of dark gray steel, their lightning claws spraying gore and viscera across the ship's hull. Thunderhawks broke the cloud like lightnings as Astartes rained death on the retreating Dark Eldar. Basil and what remained of his men had been saved despite all odds, and met with the commander of the Astartes. His skin was ghastly white and his eyes pure black, and he spoke in High Gothic, an outdated language compared to modern vocabulary, who informed him of the Imperial Navy's arrival to the area soon. He then politely, yet firmly, requested a portion of whatever supplies remained aboard the wreckage. The commander was never able to identify who his saviors were, as they departed from the battlefield just shortly before the Imperial Navy arrived, leading to a rare, recorded space shark encounter that may have had a massive contribution to the Imperial conquest snowballing in the sector. Think about it. If Basil and the Imperial Navy had never gotten a foothold in the sector, the modern-day owners of the Segmentum Obscurus, and by extension the Calixtus sector, may be very different. But really, the main thing I love about this is that it was very hilarious when they make special note that their high command is very well-mannered. I don't know. I just think it's very charming. I've known a lot of Maori and Samoan people in my life, being Filipino, and those people are wild, dude. And just thinking about them minding their manners is just, I don't know, it's just so funny. I don't know. Most famous of all space shark involvement was during the Badab War. During the war, 6 companies of space sharks made an unexpected appearance in the galactic northwest of the Maelstrom Zone, on the outskirts of the Golgothan Wastes. Shade Lord Tybros contacted the Loyalist forces in the sector, formally requesting to join the war effort, bringing their support to the Loyalist forces with that signature space shark politeness we all know and love. The Loyalist forces screened the mysterious strangers, subjecting them to intense gene sampling and psychic interrogation. With the Inquisitor Legate approving for their involvement, the Carcharodons immediately plunged themselves into the Endymion cluster, the territory of the Mantis warriors. Rushing past the Fire Angels who were slowly sieging the Mantis warriors' homeworld of Endymion Prime, the Carcharodons brought upon the Mantis warriors such a ridiculous ass-whooping across their sector that they had almost immediately knocked the Mantis warriors out of the war in a superhuman blitzkrieg. The Badab War itself is its own entire realm, so I won't get into that rabbit hole now. The space sharks in general are on the more fleshed out side of the Pentarchy of Blood, and I could go on about them for quite some time, like in Badab or their uneasy alliance with the Ashen Claws that I covered in my Shattered Legions video, by the way, but I do actually have some models to make, so let's actually, get on with it. I initially got in this Primaris model as I wanted to have a cool, menacing pose where the Marine was walking forward, but then I remembered that I had a mini just like this in my box of the new Mark VI Marines. Thank you to Mr. Kalig for that. He funded the box a long time ago, but I did get it. This is my proof. Not only is it the same pose as the mini I was going to use initially, but being an older armor mark prevents me from having to do significant re-sculpting. I've demonstrated that I'm unhinged enough to do it, but I'm going to use the easy option this time. The first step that I was going to take on this conversion was using this metal awl to punch a bunch of pilot holes in a loose diagonal grid across the leg. While this is not Mark V armor, bonding studs are a common feature for the Carcharodons, so I definitely wanted to include a bunch on this conversion. These are 1.2mm ball bearings that came as a recommendation from someone, and they turned out to be pretty much a 95% match to the size of the pre-molded bonding studs that you find on various armors. I just used a bigger pin vise drill bit that I normally use to drill just enough to rest the ball about halfway in. Then I secured it with gel super glue. I'm very happy with the result of this, and the size is, like I said, almost a very perfect match. So if you are the guy that recommended this to me, you know who you are. Thank you very much. Next step were the arms. I'm choosing to use 2 arms from the Monopose Assault Intercessors kit since I have so many of them laying around. This open hand bit may be one of my favorite bits in the entire range, like ever, although the pauldron has to come off. I cut off the pauldron and chose to replace it with one of the Mark 6 pauldrons covered in bonding studs to bring the bonding stud aesthetic to the top of the model. The arm and the pauldron were both secured into place with some green stuff and super glue. As for the left arm, I'm using another bit from the Monopose Assault Intercessor kit, although the pauldron was replaced by this super nice and fancy Space Sharks pauldron. This was a 3D print, and the entire STL pack covers multiple different armor types for the sharks. I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to get these. They're super cheap. The whole set was like, I don't know, like $5. If you don't have a 3D printer, Space Sharks are very popular, so you can buy 3D printed bits or even decals if you want to go that route. There's no shortage of materials for the Space Sharks, don't worry. Going back to the arm, the left arm came holding a pistol, but I cut off the hand to replace it with a melee weapon. For this, I stole a power maul from the Chaos Legionnaires kit for 2 reasons. 1, we don't really see a lot of power mauls anymore, and 2, it's lore appropriate for a Space Shark to use whatever equipment he can get his hands on. If you know you're not getting resupplied for another couple decades, I don't think you really care if your bonking stick has a bird or an 8-pointed star on it. It bonks good enough either way. Finally, the last part of assembly was to choose a head, and I chose this Sergeant helm from the Mark IV Space Marine kit, which I think is probably my favorite Space Marine kit. I like the large flat panels of the face grille, and it helps complete the look overall, being a salvaged mess of Mark IV through Mark VI with some looted Chaos gear thrown in. I like it a lot. And now time for painting. The Carcharodons sport a gray power armor with black pauldron fields and are known for their intricate Maori-inspired armor markings called exile markings. While I started from a black primer, I proceeded to do my usual for black armor, that is, base coat dark gray, dry brush neutral gray, then dry brush a light gray. But notice that I said black armor? Yeah, I'm not a smart pup. I just reflexively started painting black armor. In fact, the entire time I was sitting here working on this mini, I'm sitting here looking at it and like, man, that's kind of dark for gray. I don't know what's going on, but maybe it'll work out. I'm just a fucking moron. It had only really occurred to me what was going on when I started doing freehands, and I had to throw a base coat over my freehanding and start over, so that kind of hurt my soul, but in retrospect, it was definitely the right call. Now, the armor was pretty simple when I could get it right, having started from a gray base coat and dry brushed sky gray, and then a white on the sharpest points. The exile markings were a bit of a different story, so I'm going to split the screen here for a tangent talk here to talk about the tattoos of the Maori people. As always, I've tried very hard to get my research accurate, with most of the info pulled from a official tattoo resource site. But if any passing Maori dude wants to correct me, I not only welcome you, but I insist that you do. Having accurate information about other cultures is very important to me, so yeah, if I mess up anything, please let me know. When talking about Maori-style tattoos, it's very important to know that there are mainly 2 types of these tattoos, Kirituhi and Tamako. Kirituhi is the design style that normally goes on the body, while the Tamako is the style that goes on one's face. While both are very similar on the surface in terms of aesthetics, Tamako is reserved for the Maori people. Anyone can get Kirituhi, but Tamako facial tattoos are the domain of the native Maori people, and having those tattoos on your face when you are not of the native or not Maori can be seen as offensive if you are not of the native populace. Regardless of flavor, all of the designs are very super intricate. It's not just what you tattoo, but the negative space and then how you infill the other shapes. Like, it's a very free-form design that usually hugs the natural body shape and kind of goes with your musculature, which is like the exact kind of thing I have a lot of trouble designing. We're going to look at some footage that I have from before the repaint of the armor, but I did spend a little time sketching out designs. My target areas were the right arm, left forearm, chest, and the outside of the left leg. Given the contrast of the size of the Maori people, seriously, these people are just naturally huge. I've never met one that wasn't just ripped. But the contrast to a 1.5-inch size plastic spaceman is a little, there's some differences there. But I knew on these small areas I could only be so ornate. So instead of trying to do very big designs, I tried to lean heavier on infill patterns or geometric patterns, since I knew those were going to be easier to paint on such a small surface. I fretted about my design for hours, but I knew at the end of the day, I just had to do it. So I watered down some white paint, broke out my sharp brush, and just went for it. I'm very sorry to say I did not do these on camera. I have enough trouble just staying in frame with my shit-ass phone camera when base coating. When it comes to freehands, there's there's no way. I gotta contort to do that. But as you can see, I kind of ended up deviating from my original plans, but I think it came out all right. It could be better, but I think it gets the aesthetic across at least. Or not. Like I said, I'm not a tattoo artist. For the rest of the mini, I used 2 thin coats metallics for all the gold and silver areas. I used to always stick with Citadel metallics, not really out of choice, it's just more like everything else really sucked compared to them, but I really like Duncan's metallics here, so I'm probably going to stick with these for the future. I need to test more of the 2 thin coats brand out in general, but I've already got enough paint as is. I want to use up what I've got before I try it out. But so far, really good first impressions. With all the base coating done, it came to shading, and shading the mini meant coming back to old reliable, the Ghetto Marine Juice. Sonic Sledgehammer detailed this recipe that mimics an old Forge World recipe that the heavy metal studio painters used to use when painting a lot of minis. This recipe is a little deviation, but man, I love this mixture. I use it a lot. I've been using it for a lot of my videos lately. It's just very fire and forget. Just, watch for pooling as usual. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it. And with my marine all juiced up, I just scribbled out a base and it was good to go. And here I present to you the completed Carcharodons Outtro. I contemplated adding on some green stuff bones or shark tooth necklaces on the larger surfaces, but I think putting the emphasis on the exile markings instead was the right call. Plus, I've tried making green stuff necklaces in the past, and it's just a massive headache, man. But yeah, I really love the posing of this mini, and I'm just generally a big fan of neutral poses in general. I think that's becoming the part of minis that really make it or break it for me. When I'm browsing through what other people make, or when I'm making my own thing, I usually try to be very attentive to how the body is positioned, and seeing some really whack-ass poses on Instagram, yeah, it makes me really attentive to that. But anyways, I love this mini, and it's quickly climbed the ranks as one of my favorite Marines I've ever made. It's that simple. It's fucking cool.
You already answered no, dude.
Now, whether I walk out of this prison a free man or not.
You're not walking out of here.
Yeah, at this point, you should only be thinking about what you want for your last meal.
A man.
Sorry?
For my last meal, one man, please.
No.
The Flesh Eaters are a Blood Angels successor chapter from an obscured past. Little is known about their origins or what founding they come from, with their only concrete history being that they were already active in the 33rd millennium when the War of the False Primarch broke out. Besides a few of their known campaigns, the Flesh Eaters are an enigma, but whether or not that history is guarded or simply lost to time is, well, if you couldn't guess the pattern by now, unknown. The Flesh Eaters are one of the oldest living chapters within the world of Warhammer 40k, proudly standing at the top of that ultra-iconic Space Marine lineup within the pages of Rogue Trader next to their gene cousins, the Flesh Terrors. Just two flesh-related chapters hanging around, just standing right next to each other, literally side by side. Contrary to popular belief, that's not exposition for the sake of this video narrative. Rather, it was a foreshadowing to a very painful experience rooted in my inability to read and the misery that emanates from it, but we'll get to that. Despite their status as Rogue Trader veterans, the Flesh Eaters are, as many of their fellow brother chapters are, overshadowed by the magnificence of the Blood Angels. Even as popular as the Blood Angels' successors can be, Games Workshop seems determined to keep the main Space Marine legions in the spotlight for as long as possible, and allow the lesser spawn of Sanguinius to languish in obscurity, outside of the occasional novel. Except the Lamenters, they're pretty much professional languishers at this point, and we love them for it. Now get the hell out, this is the Flesh Eaters video. Speaking of angel spawn, the Flesh Eaters are dramatically noted as fatally undone by their gene seed on various wikis and resources, although what that actually means is never actually clarified anywhere. In general, the Sons of Sanguinius enjoy long lifespans, delicious food, and long walks on the beach, yet their gene seed also changes the aspirant's physiology, giving them pale skin and long fang-like teeth. Most notably, though, they are the unfortunate inheritors of two major gene seed defects, the Red Thirst and the Black Rage. This is probably common knowledge for a lot of you guys, but I'm going to quickly touch on them. The Red Thirst imbues the Battle Brother with an insatiable lust for blood, a flaw they generally deem shameful, and go to great lengths to conceal from the larger populace, unless you are a Battle Brother of the Blood Drinkers, which I covered in the Achilles Crusade video. It's in the name, really. The Black Rage invokes periods of heightened aggression in the Battle Brother, caused by the psychic imprint of Sanguinius' death that is deeply ingrained within the gene seed. Could the Flesh Eater's true past lay somewhere in the middle of this Bermuda Triangle of implications? Their name, their obscured history, and the fatal undoing? Could their name be more than a name, maybe a nom de guerre? A stigma, perhaps, gained by the unfortunate snacking of human flesh in the moment's passion? The Lexiconum blatantly states that they engage in cannibalistic rituals, yet it cites no source for this claim, making it baseless conjecture at best. Regardless of the rumors that whirl about them, the Flesh Eaters carry on in their duties, all the while faithful to the Imperium. Speaking of the Flesh Eaters' service, not much is known about their enemies they may or may not have snacked upon. They have been described as some as aggressive and always eager to engage their enemies, their most famous veteran squad being known far and wide as the Jaws of Doom. On top of their normal uniform of pure red with a slim vertical stripe down the helmet's center, the Jaws of Doom ornament their pauldrons with a monstrous skull and their helms with a snarling maw, which is supposed to look badass, but it's Rogue Trader art, so it ends up looking a little doofy in that Rogue Trader way that absolutely melts my heart of stone. The Flesh Eaters were, of course, instrumental in their involvement in the War of the False Primarch, which is why they're in this video series, but they have had their hands in conflicts both famous and obscure. On the more obscure side, the Flesh Eaters are noted to have participated in the Alvatine suppression, with nothing known about the incident, save that the Flesh Eaters deployed a spearhead force of rhinos painted in desert fashion. Many chapters in the current canon are hesitant to repaint their armor and camouflage. Yet this was pretty common practice back in the Rogue Trader days. Another recorded conflict under their belt is the Golance War. Galance? Actually, I like Galance. We're going to go with that. Led by notable chapter commander Isaiah, not Isaiah, it's close, but it's not there, the Flesh Eaters were trying to usurp control of a planet that had come under occupation by Eldar forces, looking to gain control of a secret stash of weapons on the planet. While the Flesh Eaters were mighty in their assault, the Eldar were
Dug in like an Alabama tick.
accruing a kill count of 350 Astartes before the Mentors chapter were able to reinforce the Flesh Eaters and expel those stupid sexy elves from the planet. The Flesh Eaters operated under strength after the Galance War until High Fleet Leviathan threatened to devour all life on the Blood Angels' homeworld of Baal. The Flesh Eaters responded to their distress calls, with their chief librarian, Scarabon, joining a war council before the siege to enlighten his brother chapters on the nature of the Tyranid menace. During this council, Captain Sutona of the Angels of Light, a name-only successor chapters of the Blood Angels, accused the librarian of gaining his knowledge of the beasts from the Eldar, to which he replied, and I quote, "Yeah, so?" Scarabon then reveals a theory that he had been working on with these Eldar scientists on how the hive mind may be a sort of middle stage evolution for the species, the metapod of the Tyranid life cycle, if you will, on their path to true spiritual butter freedom. An interesting theory if you think about it, but kind of weird to bring up in the middle of a war council? Okay, I guess Sutona kind of forced his hand. I do wonder if he was reprimanded for consorting with Xenos, though, or maybe he just died in the assault and he just didn't have to worry about it. It's kind of hard to punish a dead guy, but then again, this is Warhammer 40k, so there are ways if you're determined enough. In the aftermath of the devastation of Baal, Commander Dante of the Blood Angels, now newly crowned regent of the Imperium Nihilus, launched the Angels Halo campaign based within the Red Scar system. A system known for its blood-like crimson glow, many successors of the Blood Angels are now fighting to reclaim the territory from the High Fleet menace. With the introduction of Primaris Marines, the Flesh Eaters were brought back up to strength to take part in this conflict, something that Gabriel Seth of the Flesh Terrors surprisingly did not respond well to in the novel Red Fury, and I will actually cite this one because I did buy this one for one of my past videos. But this pissed off Seth for some reason. Part of me wonders what the Flesh Eaters had done to the chapter to have the Flesh Terrors respond so disappointingly, but most of me really just doesn't give a shit because I've had to correct the script like 40 times because I keep writing Flesh Terror instead of Flesh Eater, and the section is making it worse. But yeah. Now with reinforcements in hand, the Flesh Eaters' last known location was a drawn-out conflict on the shrine world of Akrabalar. The veteran Flesh Eaters are defending the planet against High Fleet Leviathan with the newly raised blood scythes from the Ultima founding. A real big brother bonding experience for the bitty baby blood scythes if you think about it. They, however, have been reinforced by the Cruer Blades, the biggest sword fanatics this side of the Mississippi, or the Great Rift, if you will. But seriously, just go look at any material around them. It's just a list of guys and their favorite sword. It's f***ing hilarious. The Cruer Blades have sentenced themselves to a self-imposed penitent crusade for failing to reach Baal before it was, devastated, and so wander the Red Scar, helping in the Angels Halo campaign wherever they can. Now, before I get into building this model, I gotta tell you guys something. You know that bit about me mixing up the Flesh Terrors and Flesh Eaters constantly? That wasn't a bit. I have been constantly mixing up the Flesh Eaters and Flesh Terrors since the start of this project. You want to know how bad it got? I hesitate to even say this, but I built a Flesh Terror at first, but I did the whole thing. I crafted it, I painted it, all on camera, spin arounds. I took a fucking group photo of them with the wrong dude. I wrote a script for the Flesh Terrors. Like, it was a lot of work. Only when I posted some whip pictures to my Patreon did one of my patrons say, hey, did you get mixed up? Then I realized what I had done.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Regardless, I want to shout out my patron Nuz for catching this mistake before I went through the trouble of editing this video and then uploading it and then making myself look really stupid. So everyone please thank Nuz. But also, fair warning, if I ever do a video on flesh tears, I'm 100% recycling this footage. I put way too much work into it. I'm doing it. I don't care. For the flesh eater conversion, I decided to use my final Indominus Lieutenant, it being the last one stashed away from splitting those old starter kits with a friend who really needed a block of Necron warriors. Not only is this mini just pretty good, even though he's kind of sticking his whole crotch out for some reason, but it would make recovering from the video mix-up a little less painful. If you've seen the Red Wings video, I tore out the Marine's abdominal area to replace the new style tabard with a more traditional one with resculpting, but I'd figured I'd just leave it unaltered this time around. Not only is it just quicker, but someone out there might actually like this style of tabard, and I know it's an opinion, but they are wrong, but I'm going to cater to them for once. I'm not biased at all. As I had planned to make our Marine a member of the infamous Jaws of Death, I wanted to keep with a melee-oriented loadout, and the Storm Shield is known for reliably keeping people not dead, or at least prolonging the deading. The default arm of the Primaris Lieutenant worked absolutely fine, as is for this task, although a diagonal sliver was taken off near the base of the arm to allow the arm to rest lower. Not only did this kind of change the pose up in general, but it had the side effect of making the shield touch the edge of the foot, allowing the piece to have 2 connection points, which gives this piece a lot of durability once the plastic glue goes on. Like, I dropped this thing really hard, and it was fine, so yeah, that's good. This lieutenant has a hole on the left side of the waist to hold a sheathed sword, but I wanted to save that bit for other projects. I took a generic reliquary from, I don't know, some random Marine kit. It doesn't matter. You get like a billion of these all over the place. Who cares? But I used some sprue glue to attach it over the hole. Easy fix, and now I have a cool sword to use for another project. On the other side of the mini, I had the random urge to try and fill the empty holster with a handgun grip, since he's not actively holding one of his pistols. I didn't want to make anything too detailed, just something to kind of fill the silhouette, and hopefully maybe trick someone into thinking there's a proper pistol there, if they didn't know and they're not looking too hard, you know. I took a piece of square styrene rod and just cut out a very basic handle shape. I rounded the end before attaching it, and, you know, for pure silhouette purposes, you know, it gets the point across. It's time to arm this guy in more ways than one. The right arm was a recycled Assault Intercessor arm because, again, I'm sitting on a stash of a billion of them. The pistol hand was removed in favor of arming the Marine with a chainsword from the Assault Squad kit. The purity seal on the blade didn't match the motion of the pose, however, so it had to be trimmed and sanded off to look believable. The pre-molded pauldron on the arm was sliced off, and while the Jaws of Death are noted to have monster skulls drawn on their pauldron, I decided to use this Crux Terminatus with a skull on it. It's less freehanding, and the skull motif is still kind of there in a sense. I think it's a good compromise for, you know, trying to play catch-up. With the body finally assembled, I mounted a head to the Marine, although I did think the Primaris helmet wasn't really cutting it here. I eventually did swap it out for a beakie helmet with molded laurels that I printed a bunch of years ago. I don't remember where I got the STL, but if I can find it, I will put it in the description. But I think it was a good call, and it'll really invoke that Rogue Trader Jaws of Death in the painting stage. I forgot a power pack, but whatever. I just grabbed one from the pile. It's time for paint. I wanted a nice retro red for my Flesh Eater, so I started from this white primer and layered on Vallejo Flat Red. This paint is a bit thin, so it took 3 coats, but the result was nice and vibrant. I'm a big fan of that fiery hot Blood Angels red from the older editions, so I got to dry brushing the entire mini with an orange. My orange paint is also really thin, but 2 rounds of dry brushing got me a good color. Actually, my Vallejo yellow, green, orange, and sometimes my red are kind of thin for some reason. Maybe I do have more of a reason to check out that 2 thin coats line. I don't know. I don't want to buy paint if I've got paint. But anyways. After the orange dry brush on the edges of the mini, I mixed yellow and orange to get an even brighter orange, and dry brushed areas of focus. It ended up pretty good in my opinion, although the orange was a little messy, so I tidied it up with some red glazes. With the armor done, I turned to the menial labor, the joints and metallics and all that stuff nobody likes painting. I base coat all of these in a dark gray, which will make sure all of the white primer is covered, and it'll ensure that the metallic layers go on a little easier later on. Some areas like the pouches got a touch of neutral gray highlights as well. I tried to offset the warm temperature of the armor with a cool black set of pouches to kind of even it all out. Plus, I don't know, it's kind of the retro style for the Blood Angels from what I've seen. I mixed a white with my Vallejo Sky Gray to base coat all of the robes, purity seals, and the Crux Terminatus, the plan being to tint these tan with a brown wash down the road. Afterwards, I base coated all of my silvers, the various decorative bits like the crotch trinkets and the shield trim, and the laurel all got a nice coat of gold, and it was coming along nicely. Looking at the mini, I knew a wash was really going to make this thing pop, but before that, I had to finish a few things, starting with the chainsword. The chainsword was painted white, and I quickly used a marker to sketch out some loose hazard stripes to really heighten that old school vibe. They're not perfect stripes, but I don't really care about getting my stripes perfect. To me, I'd rather just YOLO a straight line than fiddle with masking tape for like 9 hours and just drag the whole thing out. These days, my time is very valuable, and when it comes to making good decisions, I've proven many years ago that I cannot be trusted with that task, so here we are. With most of the miniature done, I had to put on the Flesh Eater's signature stripe down the helmet, which is notably a more narrow stripe than what you see on like lieutenant stripes these days. I used that same white and sky gray mix to put that little line down the helmet. For this paint mix, white lightens the mix, while that sky gray gives it like nearly 1 coat coverage. Seriously, Vallejo Sky Gray is probably one of my favorite paints ever. This stuff is great. For the Jaws of Death signature doofy maw, I started with my white to make a general outline of the maw, and then I alternated between my dark gray and my white mixture to refine the tooth pattern inside of that shape. I also had to freehand the chapter heraldry since, the flesh terrors ruined everything. But I have found STLs available online to purchase if you're looking to print up some Flesh Eater pauldrons. These STLs come with a hard transfer that you can slap onto any pauldron, or you can just print the entire pauldron with the symbol on it, which is what I do, just because it seems easier. I'll put this link and any other good links for the Flesh Eaters I find in the description below. And now, it's finally time to wash. I mix up my universal wash, the marine juice mixture I talked about in the Carcharodons video. 1 part black wash, 1 part brown wash, and 2 parts glazed medium makes for an awesome wash that you can just throw over an entire miniature. The original mix only calls for 1 drop of glazed medium, but I find 2 kind of eases up on how much that wash tints the base coats that you have down, but you can definitely drop my mixture down to the original even ratio if you want a stronger tint. I just try not to let it tint too much. I mean, it still tints a little bit, but not as much as, whatever. And with the Flesh Eater washed, all that was left was to scrap up a rusty dusty base, give them a nice rim job, and call it done. And ta-da! 1 Flesh Eaters of the Jaws of Doom Assault Squad. I know this may be a sort of basic conversion, but I think it looks pretty good. And, you know, for having to delay the video order I was producing these in and quickly whip up something that I actually managed to do in a single night, for me, I'm a very slow worker when it comes to painting and all this. So doing all this in a single night, that's pretty good for my standards, honestly. In general, I want to say that I like the Flesh Eaters, but I think it comes with trauma because now I literally cannot say either Flesh Eaters or Flesh Terrors without having some paranoid breakdown that I'm about to say the wrong chapter. And I will say this right now. In the future, a couple months, years, decades from now, when I have to talk about the Flesh Eaters, I will accidentally say Flesh Terrors at some point. And I'm sorry. But this project has broken me.
All I ever wanted was the survival of our race. You must see why I had to betray you. You didn't betray me. You betrayed yourself. No, Optimus!
With a long-enduring lineage traceable back to the Great Crusade, the Red Talons are ferocious warriors of the Emperor. Many a foe and traitor have been slain by their hands, specializing in the hunting for their heretical kin, the Chaos Space Marine legions, responsible for laying low the Emperor of mankind. Such is their bloodied history, and such will be their legacy long after the last traitor's life is snuffed out beneath their boots. They are unceasing, they are relentless, and a little batshit crazy on top of it all. The Red Talons are another older chapter of Space Marines, though not as venerable as the previously covered members of the Pentarchy of Blood, having been seen as far back as the 3rd edition Space Marine Codex in 1998. I was 4 years old in 1998, just to remind all you old bloods about your impending mortality. But anyways, now that you're reeling from that, the Red Talons are, as previously mentioned, able to trace their history all the way back to the ancient days on Holy Terra. So let's go back to the beginning, just to make things easier. When the Emperor of Mankind was raising his first Astartes on the soil of Terra, there was a particular lad named Autek Mor, who was one of the first to be raised and inducted into the Emperor's 10th Legion. Autek Mor fought alongside the Emperor during the conquest of the Sol System, which is basically the section of space from Mercury to Pluto. Pluto. I don't want to hear, oh, but Pluto isn't... Shut up. Autek Mor was a seasoned veteran by the time the Crusade reached the planet of Medusa, where they were reunited with their missing gene father, Ferrus Manus. By Iron Hando's decree, Autek Mor was placed in command of the 10th Legion's Moragul clan as its Iron Lord. No, not that Iron Lord, it's basically the Iron Hands equivalent of a company captain. Or at least I'm pretty sure it's a captain. If you're one of the 4 Iron Hands players on the planet, please feel free to correct me here. Autek Mor and Ferrus Manus were not exactly the closest of co-workers, so Ferrus Manus commonly assigned troublemakers and volatile assets of other clans to the Moragul clan, essentially giving Autek Mor thousands of unruly teenagers and busted up vehicles to try to make a functioning fighting force out of. Autek Mor overcame these challenges and became known for his extreme discipline across the clan, even going so far as to kill dissenters and hecklers in quote-unquote honor duels, thus ruling the entire clan with an iron... Oh, shit, okay, I get it. While the Moragul clan were a bunch of misfits and idiots being led by a bloodthirsty drill sergeant, they did make a name for themselves in key conflicts. During the Drop Site Massacre on Isstvan V, which I covered in my Shattered Legions video, by the way, Autek Mor and his crew were some of the first loyalist reinforcements to arrive at the conflict, rolling up in their flagship, the Red Talon. Whoa, hey, title drop. With the conflict in full swing, the Red Talon was successful in breaching the traitors' defensive perimeter in an attempt to reinforce the Iron Hands and other planet-side loyalists. However, the Red Talon took such extreme damage while performing the maneuver that it was forced to fly back into space, where it was chased off by traitor starships. We've all seen it before. Someone gets too eager and jumps the gun. I get it.
At least I have chicken.
With mountains of loyalist Marines piled high on the sands of Isstvan V, a fire was lit in Autek Mor's eyes, and he made it his mission to eradicate every heretical piece of shit that forsook the benevolence of the Emperor. Clan Moragul gladly saw to the slaughter of traitors till the end of the heresy, gladly seeing to the slaughter of traitors till the end of the Great Scouring. Gilliman's Codex Astartes saw to the fragmentation of the Space Marine legions, which saw Autek Mor rise to the position of Chapter Master. Naming his new chapter after his signature whip, the newly established Red Talons saw to the new millennium the only way they saw fit, with the slaughter of traitors, which continues to this day, where, they slaughter traitors. As they say, if you do what you love doing, then you never work a day in your life. Now, obviously the Red Talons have that old reliable hobby they can always come back to, but the Red Talons are veterans of many conflicts. With some prestige earned in conflicts like the War of the Beast, the Battle of Amiens, and the Gothic War, although aren't all of these battles Gothic, technically? Like Imperium and 40k is Gothic, so...
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Many of these conflicts were against some very minor Xeno races. Like, minor Xeno races. Definitely some material to poach for a minor Xenos video on my channel. The Red Talons are noted to have cooperated with the Space Wolves and the Inquisition when confronted with the Draxian hegemony, a young species with not even a physical descriptor to their name. The Draxians were not a threat at the time, which saw Inquisitor Helena Valeria make contact to learn from them. From her probing, she learned that the Xenos were little to worry about on their own, but could rise to be a threat if allied with the Tau or other minor Xeno races. At some point, the Draxians launched a conquest into Imperial territory, which saw to the Red Talons and Space Wolves being deployed to suppress the invasion. However, at some point, the Inquisition closed all records of the event, with the wikis stating the only surviving evidence of the conflict even existing being some battle honors stuck to the bumper of a Space Wolf Thunderhawk. Another Xeno race the Red Talons have tussled with are the Galthites, who are described as a reptile-like saurian race. They are noted as being the creators of a weapon with a really cool name called the Galthite Lacerator, a weapon said to resemble the siege claws used by Chaos Decimators. This is definitely a Xeno I want to make one day. It's been on the list for a while. Maybe like a little Saurian lizard man kitbash, I think Pete the Wargamer did something similar to it already, but yeah, I think I could make it work. I could spin it, I'm not using those new Croc Swords though. I don't know. They're just a little too sexy, I think. It's just they make me feel weird. I don't want them. I don't want them. The Red Talons also ran into hard times with the paramours of the Morpheus Rift. Little is known about this species outside of two bits of information. 1, they are abominations of great power, and 2, the only good thing is that they're located close to the galactic core, the true center of the Milky Way, which is complete misery business for every race, leaving the Red Talons opting to simply not be caught in the middle of it. It'd be nice to know a bit more about them, but hey, that's what you get when you deal with Games Workshop lore. For the Red Talon build, I opted to utilize this running Marine from the Space Marine Heroes line. This one in particular was second-hand, but still in good condition, just needed some TLC. As the first step of that TLC, I immediately began to tear it into shreds, my main targets being the pre-molded pauldrons, and most notably the entire shin off of the right leg. Don't worry, you may think I am blind and dumb, but I assure you that my eyes work perfectly fine. While I would rather prefer using some independent arms for the Marines' weapons, cutting this classic bolter in half was sadly necessary, even though I've come to greatly appreciate the regular bolter in the New Age era of ugly-ass bolt rifles. With large parts of the Mini excised, it was time to rebuild. After all, you gotta chop plastic to build it. Or something. I used varying sizes of cylindrical and square styrene rods, combined with flat pieces to fashion together the most convincing prosthetic leg I can manage. I tried to make it look somewhat functional with some points that looked like they could rotate and some articulation in the ankle, and a segmented foot structure that looks like it can kind of accommodate some uneven surfaces. I could have also run a wire or something along the side, but I kind of liked it as is, and also I just didn't feel like it, so yeah. The next step was replacing the bolter I destroyed with this heavy bolter. As these arms were perfectly spaced to hold a bolter, I figured they would translate fine over to the heavy bolter, although the left hand was annoyingly molded into the grip. This is a big reason why I prefer the older hand design you see on old like Tac Squad kits, but if I cut out the grip of the bolter and kind of graft it onto the front of the heavy bolter, it sort of blends if you don't look at it closely, so don't look at it closely if you don't mind. With a piece of styrene on the front to recreate the little camera bit and the pauldron slapped on, the Marine was coming along pretty nicely. Also, the Red Talons specific heraldry was 3D printed, but if you'd like the STL I used, check the description. The STL was cheap and there's a lot of options, or you can find them on Etsy. They're not hard to find. You got options, With the Marine assembled, it was time to gussy him up with accessories. I harvested this Admech backpack for various techie bits to adorn the Mini with, but I had apparently forgot to film it. Yeah, definitely not intended, but what I do have is some footage of making this servo skull. While I don't have a servo skull bit on me, having a heavy weapon like this just kind of feels like you should have a servo skull. Like, it's one of those things that just kind of matches, like, this feels right, Starting with a plastic skull from the Games Workshop Skulls kit, I glued a piece of trimmed styrene on over the eye to act as that little Saiyan Scouter eye scope a lot of people in 40k like to wear. I then began to start randomly gluing on styrene to make nondescript bobs and bits on the skull. Maybe the receivers or transmitters of some kind. Who knows? And honestly, who really gives a shit, as long as it looks cool. I had recently gotten some coiled wire from Zinj Industries to test out, and I'm glad I bought a whole bunch because it worked perfectly for this job here. These may look like guitar string, but are like 9,000% easier to bend and coil in comparison. They also don't hold hard kinks in the wire as harshly, making for an overall upgrade to guitar string if you don't mind waiting for it to ship in. I use varying sizes of this coiled wire to make the flowing trail of wires and weave it through his little undead ball gag as well. I secured it to the back of the power pack with a little putty to make sure the fragile little guy doesn't snap off too easily. After the putty cured, I peeled it back off and then put some super glue there, and this connection is rock solid now. And there we go. With his little targeting slut hovering behind him, I think this Marine definitely holds up to the role as heavy weapons guy. It's time to paint. For painting the Red Talon, I started layering flat red on top of a black primer. I wanted to try mixing up my process for power armor on this Mini, although in the end it didn't really have a worthwhile payoff, but I'll go into it here. After the base coat, I decided to try washing it immediately with my mainstay wash that I use in these videos. 1 part brown wash, 1 part black wash, and then 2 parts glaze medium. After the wash had dried, I tried to dry brush some highlights, which was just a mixture of white and that red. When you're mixing highlights, white generally makes a color colder. Colors like green and red benefit from being mixed with yellow instead, which does make a brighter highlight color, but keeps the warmth of that color. I understand the concept behind it, but I have no actual idea what the term is. Just color temperature, I guess. But I specifically use white instead of yellow when highlighting my red to help reinforce the cold, robotic vibe of these Iron Hand successors. After the dry brush highlights, I felt like the white mix was a little harsher than I intended, so my plan was to glaze the whole Mini with a mix of contrast medium and flesh terror red. However, I wanted to ensure the highlights weren't drowned out by this red, so I ended up just dry brushing the whole mini with pure white anyways. So essentially my solution to highlights that looked too white was to dry brush pure white. Either way, the contrast over the white did successfully push my armor back into the red territory that I was happy with, and the entire experiment could be classified as good enough, but my other method is usually a lot faster and easier. But hey, as the wisdom of the ancient Sun Tzu said in regards to experimentation, the only way to find out is to fuck around. With the red armor basically done, I turned to taking care of the black and metallic areas. I base coat these in a dark gray as I've been moving away from using pure black in my projects to help get more depths in my recesses. Afterwards, the areas that'll stay dark gray get a dry brush of neutral gray, with some areas like the hands being covered with some poster tack to help protect them. Side note, but I've had some people ask what this cable is that they sometimes see in my shots. It's a headphone cable, since I yearn for the certainty of wires. I share an office with my girlfriend, and sometimes when she's talking to friends or I'm doing audio editing, I throw them on. So sometimes they'll either be talking about like gacha games or, venting about personal problems, and I'm over here just like... After the dry brushing, I base coat all of the silver areas with, silver. I considered doing a gunmetal silver at first, then washing it, then adding bright silver highlights, but I didn't really feel like it, so I didn't. There were also a few areas that were a brassy bronze, so I took care of those afterwards, bringing that color down onto the back of the robo leg just to kind of help distribute the color. The only thing I need to do now is paint the pauldron banding in accordance to the Codex Astartes. I could just leave it red and just say it's third company, but that felt a little too lazy, even for me, so after some careful thinking and consideration, I went with the gray stripes of the 8th company. With all the base coats on, we shade the entire mini with the same black-brown glaze mix we did earlier, just like we always do. I don't know, it's just a really nice wash. The little color depth the first wash achieved wasn't really worth the trouble, so while this armor experimentation was worthwhile simply for the acquisition of the information, I'll probably just stick to a single wash at the end. It just makes for a faster process overall. Whether you're speed painting, regular painting, or making YouTube videos, just a thought. Anyways, with the wash dried up and the base quickly gussied up, the Red Talon was complete. Before the start of the Pentarchy of Blood project, I didn't know too much about the Red Talons. I kind of had like a overall familiarity with them, but after doing this, I've come to like them a lot. It was a nice opportunity to make prosthetic limbs, which I don't really do as much as I should, honestly. In the age of Primaris, you don't really get a lot of these prosthetic legs like you used to, especially in the old Iron Hands upgrade kit, but there's a lot of Robo Hands around here. But yeah, in general, I really like the Red Talons. When it comes to Iron Hand successors, though, I still think my favorite ones are the Iron Lords, but the Red Talons are, right now, a close second place. These guys are alright by me. When I recorded all these videos, I did all of the narration at once, but we have had some new patrons since then, and I'd like to go ahead and thank them real quick. I'd like to say thank you to Mint Green Monkey and Nico the Templar Terminator. Whether or not he terminates Templars or if he is a Templar Terminator is unknown, but thank you both very much for your support. I recently had to deal with a very hefty car bill, and sadly I did have to dip into some money that I had reserved for a new camera, but I wouldn't even have the opportunity. I'd probably be way worse off without my patrons, and I'm very glad I had them to help lessen the blow from that car repair bill. But I'm laser focused on getting a new camera right now. It's just a matter of saving that money back up. Words cannot properly describe how thankful I am to have you guys here, and yeah, thank you.
What's up with you, Ed? Double D, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Actually,
Actually, Eddie, it's hip, it's now, but it smells funny.
The Death Eagles are another ancient and venerable chapter of Space Marines in the history of Warhammer 40k, dating all the way back to the times of Rogue Trader. However, unlike their previously perceived Pentarchy partners, they were not featured in the pages of the original Rogue Trader rulebook. Instead, they made their first appearance in White Dwarf number 123 in the year 1990, 3 whole years before the inception of 2nd edition 40k in 1993. While many of the Rogue Trader chapters do see a modern popularity with expanded lore, with novels, and sometimes exclusive models, the Death Eagles are a rare army to see these days. Compared to the pages upon pages of lore of other Pentarchy chapters have to their name, the Death Eagles are surprisingly scant in this department, being on the lesser side of the amount of concrete lore that Games Workshop has written for them. Before we talk about their lore though, we need to talk about the Death Eagles' biggest discrepancy, their uniform. Shown on screen here is the modern Death Eagle uniform. The classic black power armor is accented with white pauldron fields and a bone-colored helmet. This is the uniform that the Death Eagles have been wearing since 2004, featured in the book How to Paint Space Marines. Normally I just use a brush, but whatever suits your fancy, I guess. Anyways, the Death Eagles' original uniform scheme from White Dwarf 123 was, it's not quite halved, but it's not quartered either. It's a combination of halved and alternating between white and a pinkish purple with a gold to accent it all. Now I know what you're thinking, why would they change away from such an eye-catching uniform to something so boring, so modern, so generic? However, as many things in the Warhammer 40k universe, there may be more to this under the surface than initially believed, or perceived. Whichever one of those words works better in the script. Just cut the other one out. And cut this out too. 10,000 years ago, the galaxy was plunged into war by the infamous John Heresy. As the Astartes legions were picking allegiances, it was not uncommon for loyalist forces originating from traitor legions to continue fighting in the Emperor's name. The Death Eagles are rumored to be descendants from one such loyalist force who broke away from their parent legion, the Emperor's Children. Refusing to give up their legion's color and heraldry, the ancient Astartes must have logically saw the bitter fighting of the heresy to the end, surviving one of the most apocalyptic wars in human history, and later reorganized into their own chapter in an unknown founding. However, in the grim darkness of the far future, the Phoenician and his kin are villainized as murderous, lecherous traitors, maybe rightfully so as the poster boys of hentai marines.
And you two motherfuckers need Jesus.
Regardless, to claim such a heritage would be unthinkable in the modern era, much less be boastful to such a claim, so it is theorized that the current Death Eagles may have taken the black at some point in their history in order to hide their traitorous lineage. The waters are muddied even further on top of this, as many now suspect their genetic lineage to originate from the bird-adjacent Raven Guard Legion, yet no concrete answers can be confirmed by any suspicious party. While this is an in-universe take on the uniform change between their inception in 1990 and their updated scheme debuting in 2004, in a more meta sense there are some other theories that could explain it all as well. Some people think the original colors are silly, and the scheme may have been updated to match the grim darkness of 4th edition in 2004, while others may believe that Games Workshop simply named 2 chapters the same thing and blended their lore together. Honestly, for Games Workshop, that's pretty fucking on brand, but the truth of it will probably never be confirmed, leaving the original scheme and the revised scheme 2 sides of the same coin. Personally, I kinda like the idea of mixing both uniforms into an army, maybe the standard Battle Brother getting the eccentric uniform and all black being reserved for some sort of specialist squad, or the other way around, whatever. Regardless of what color the Death Eagles don, their work as loyalist forces continues into the modern era, although their list of known engagements is small. Honestly, being a member of the Pentarchy of Blood is probably where most people know the Death Eagles, and it usually stops there. But hey, they do other stuff too. As previously mentioned in the Carcharodons video, the Death Eagles collaborated with other Astartes in the Solar Rebellions. Within the Segmentum Solar, chaos uprisings began to surge, the fires of war fanned by the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, and World Eaters traitor legions. The Adeptus Astartes were called to suppress the rebellion, the loyalist forces consisting of the Death Eagles, the Carcharodons, the Angels of Absolution, and everyone's favorite inquisitorial lapdog, the Minotaurs. While the corruption was successfully expunged, records of these events are inconsistent in terms of deployed manpower and timelines, possibly suggesting some meddling from a certain chapter, but probably not, but maybe, not a lot, just a little, as a treat. The Death Eagles are also known for their efforts in the reconquest of the Forsar sector of the Segmentum Tempestus. A portion of the Forsar sector and its hive world capital of... oh, alright, same name, got it. Was overrun by the Wa of Warboss Garagak. Side note, but I know everyone reads Wa as... but I always read it as... Anyways, the Death Eagles are inducted into a reclamation force consisting of 2 fellow Space Marine chapters, the Aurora chapter and the Revilers, as well as the Imperial Guard and a handful of Titans, and successfully reclaim the sector for the Emperor. It's noted that the Raven Guard's homeworld of Deliverance is located within the Forsar sector. With the Revilers also being sons of Korax, it makes me wonder if the Death Eagles joined the Reclamation Force to possibly bolster their false heritage as fellow Raven Guard successors. Like, hey, how do you do, fellow bird bros? With how vague the lore surrounding the Death Eagles is, it's certainly a possibility, and personally, I think it's pretty cool to have that layer of uncertainty, an ambiguosity, if you will. Spell check says that's not a word, but I don't play by the rules here. When looking at the Death Eagles on Google, this picture frequently comes up. I really like the neutral pose of the left mini, and I wanted to emulate it on mine. Not recreate it one-to-one, but kind of a mirror, a mini to invoke the sassiness of this venerable relic. I got my hands on this recast of Lieutenant Amulius. This was a limited edition model from a 2019 event, I think, but it has a nice neutral pose that I wanted to use. Side note, but some people have asked me where I get my recasts from, and that's a good question, honestly. I have a friend. Let's call him Shady. Despite the alias that I've chosen for him, he's very reliable, and I've known him for years. He's in direct contact with a recaster, and I buy through him to help keep his operation safe. So I tell him what I want, and my minis show up a month later. I understand why they want to keep it on the DL, and honestly, the whole operation is kind of fun. Regardless, it does end up a very reliable way of getting these minis that are either out of print, rare, or being scalped on eBay. Anyways, with my block of Chinesium, possibly Russianite copy of Amulius in hand, I take to chopping off the right arm holding his helmet. I would have preferred to save this arm as it's a unique bit, but thinking about it, I don't really like bare heads, so what use would I have with this arm, you know? Either way, some clippers, sanding, and scraping got the area clear. I used super glue to press the 2 halves of the body together and glue it to the base. The base was pressed into place on the... that's a hard sentence. The base was pressed into place on the base with poster tack, since I wanted to put the mini on a 32mm base later, and I'll have to chop it up to get the mini off. Frustratingly, the mini's feet are molded onto the scenic base. There's probably a reason for it, but at the end of the day, damn, that's annoying. One thing I wanted to try with this mini was removing the bulbs on the side of the Mark X ankles. I'm not really going to go too much into that process though, since it was kind of a side experiment, and I don't really think it was worth the trouble. Essentially, it was just chopping them off and filling the spaces with milliput, trying to match the angles of the armor, and sanding it all smooth. It could be better though. I kind of think I need to rethink my approach on the ordeal, but as I previously said, I don't know how worth it this would be, you know? Anyways, I turned my attention to the right arm, and for this I once again dip into my large supply of Assault Intercessor arms. The pose on the reference mini had this balled fist, but those are kind of hard to come by for right hands, so despite what I show off here, I do end up using another one of my beloved open right hand bits for the monopose assault intercessor. I'm getting low on these, and I'm starting to freak out. For the left arm, I dip into the intercessor's kit for this resting bolt rifle arm, which had the pauldron trimmed off and attached at an angle that invokes that reference pose I've been following. Overall, an easy conversion that just needed to be cut off of its scenic base, since, as previously mentioned, the feet were annoyingly sculpted into the base. Also, I wanted a very specific left pauldron to invoke the same energy as the pose reference, but I didn't have it anymore. Thinking about it, I used it on the Red Wing video, but I was just very hell-bent on using that pauldron in particular, so I ended up ordering one off of eBay. I could have just set up a 3D printer and printed up something pretty close, but I didn't feel like it, and I wanted to get my hands on some bits for later videos, so may as well just knock it all out at once, you know? So we've come to a crossroads now. Classic white and purple, or the updated black, white, and bone? Well, let's think about it. There are pros and cons to each side, so we'll go ahead and list them out. One is rad as fuck, and one means painting more black armor. I can't do it, bros. We're going old school. Plus, look at it, man. Come on. Have fun for once in your life, you dusty old hag. That being said, before we actually get into that painting, we need to quickly analyze these reference pictures. As you can see from the surviving material from the time, the actual color distribution follows the same overarching idea, but differs in a few ways. For example, this Marine's right leg is purple, or magenta, really, it's magenta, while on the pose reference it's white. Looking further up, you can see that the helmets are bisected differently as well. Even the power pack has a variation, as this Marine has a silver power pack, while the 9 pixels over the shoulder of the pose reference shows a magenta power pack, which could possibly be half white as well, but we'll never know. Now, there are multiple reasons why this could be this way. Either the less rigid structure of the studio painting standards back then, or honestly just a simple mistake. But looking at the minis, the easiest and most probable explanation is simply each armor mark being different and having different areas to paint. After all, the only part of the model that matches on both are the right feet. So if you start from the right foot and begin your pattern going up from there, you do end up having to distribute the colors differently. I did mine a bit differently though, as I didn't notice the right foot pattern until I started painting, and I kind of wanted my helmet to match the pose reference's helmet. I did want to plan out my painting steps though, so I did end up taking a picture of the model and I threw it into GIMP, the art kind, not the sex kind, and colored the model on a layer with 50% opacity. Since I wanted my helmet a particular way, I started from the helmet and went down as opposed from starting from the right foot going up, and I was also much less granular with the arms, counting the entire arm as a single color zone. That part was mostly an error on my side though, since both minis show the pattern being respected over the elbow armor, and generally being much more granular over the arm than I was. Also, my pattern mainly respects the pose reference, but I did end up choosing to go with a silver power pack, mainly because it's much more visible than the other power pack, and I feel like it helped bring both of the reference minis together on one mini, if that makes sense. I just had one of those what am I doing with my life moments, recording voiceovers about some fucking color patterns on 30-year-old JPEGs at 6 a.m. What happened, man? What happened? The Death Eagle was primed white, since there's no reason to really paint white if I can just spray it on now. I'm not going to worry about edge highlighting the white, since I want to keep the fields of the armor as bright as possible. So for now, I started base coating the purple, or magenta. It's totally magenta. I don't know why the wiki says purple. It's magenta. Specifically this magenta. This Vallejo magenta is perfect right out of the bottle. Not Vallejo purple, magenta. I followed the scheme I worked out in GIMP, base coating magenta panels across the mini. I did run into some trouble around the collar, but I managed to work around the issue. Now, it had been a while since I properly heavy metal highlighted a mini, and with my desire to keep the white very bright, I decided to go for it for here. It did keep the white nice and untouched, but Man, this was a very good reminder on why I dry brush like 99% of my models. It's just faster, man. Ugh. From here is the same old boring middle steps of base coating the holsters, guns, metallics, all that. The little gubbins that aren't fun to paint, but you just kind of gotta do. With all the dark gray laid out, I broke out that 2 thin coats, gold and silver, and base coated all of the metallic areas. If you can't tell, I'm in a total honeymoon phase with these paints. They just have such good coverage, and they're so smooth if you get them right. Duncan is truly the best girl. He just understands me. When it came to washing the Mini, I was a bit more selective than I normally am. The black and silver areas got a black wash, and the white areas actually had me sit down and do a proper recess shade with a sharp brush. Compared to painting the rest of the Mini, this took a very long time. But at the end of the day, can I say it was worth it? The white looks good, but no, I don't know. I wouldn't do this for my own army. Just, no. Fuck it. With the black washing done, I hit the golds with a brown wash. There were some small bits like purity seals and a shoulder rope that got some red, and the eye lenses were painted a bright green, but my main concern was the base. I debated a while on what kind of base to do, but, we've come too far to bitch out, guys. Bam, bada, boom, goblin green base. Well, not entirely goblin green. Just as the reference base is painted, there was a transitional period where the base tops were still a recognizable goblin green, but Games Workshop started painting the base rims tan. But hey, with the green and tan base combined with this nice little backdrop I made, I think this is a very nostalgic model in a sense. Maybe nostalgic's the wrong word. In 1990, I wasn't really alive, so I can't really be nostalgic for a time I was not present for, but, it invokes the retro vibe. Also, thinking about it, I think this is the first time I've painted a base rim that wasn't black on this channel. That's kind of strange for me. But hey, with all the colors, being so bright and flashy, it felt wrong not committing, to the green and tan base. A black rimmed base and some nice, realistic looking grass on it. I don't know, it would have looked strange to me. So this one goes out to all you 50-year-old dudes out there saying, yeah, goblin green base. You keep up the good fight, you old bastards. Since the Red Talons video, we've had a new patron join the ranks. I'd like to thank Hosomi for their support. I am very broke in general, and every patron I get helps me not only in my personal life, but here on the channel as well, and I'm excruciatingly grateful for any kind of support that you guys show me. So thank you very much.
The point is, Deacon, that you have not done the dishes for 5 years.
Vladislav is right. It's unacceptable to have so many bloody dishes all over this bench like that.
I'm so embarrassed when people come over here.
What does it matter? You bring them over, you kill them!
We are finally at the last chapter of the Pentarchy of Blood. We've covered the sneaky sharks, the hungry hippos, the redacted, and the aggressively loyal, and now it's time to talk about the zombies. Technically, the second Blood Angel's successor we've talked about in this series, the Charnel Guard have been a highly requested chapter to showcase here on the channel. One of you fuckers has even asked me multiple videos ad infinitum like it's your day job or something, so without further ado, let's shut this guy up for good.
Stop it. Get some help.
The Charnel Guard are Blood Angel's successors, although when and where they spawn from is currently unknown. Many people suspect their birth to be sometime during the Third Founding, which make them littermates with chapters such as the Executioners and the Sides of the Emperor. No, not the size, the sides of the Emperor. They sport a black and maroon uniform, cementing the Pentarchy of Blood as a real black and red crowd until someone throws in the retro Death Eagles flashbang. Like many Blood Angel successors, their Gene C defects include the Black Rage and the Red Thirst, but members of the Charnel Guard are known to resemble corpses, pale and gaunt skin with eyes glazed over. They grow long, fanged canines and their breath smells of rotting flesh, giving the Charnel Guard a ghoulish appearance. While the origins of their first chapter master, Zephan, the Bringer of Sorrow, can be directly traced to their parent legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, the Charnel Guard are not considered part of the Sanguinary Brotherhood, leaving them unacknowledged heirs of Sanguinius' legacy, despite most definitely having his gene seed. Zephan himself had been present to weep over Sanguinius' body after Horus totally dubstepped him. Yet the Greater Brotherhood is coy with their relationship with them for no discernible reason. Due to the extremely reclusive nature of this chapter, it makes you wonder if being outcast is the cause or the effect of their exclusion from the Brotherhood. It has nothing to do with the fact that they look like walking corpses with SMGs. No. There's obviously something more to it. You'd think the Charnel Guard would be shitting and crying about being kept out of the glorious Vampire VIP Club, but funnily enough, the Charnel Guard have been inducted into many a random alliance over their years, making them shockingly popular to seemingly everyone except the Sons of Sanguinius. Of course, they are a member of the Pentarchy of Blood, obviously because they are in my video series, but one fraternity they've participated in was during the Great Malagantine Purge. Within the Segmentum Tempestus, heretics were stomping around in the Malagant sector. The Charnel Guard were inducted into the Manus Iri, translated to the Hands of Wrath, 5 Space Marine chapters tasked with the complete genocide of the sector. Kinda getting deja vu here. Out of the 5 chapters, the names of 2 have either been lost to time or censured, leaving the only known members of this alliance listed as the Charnel Guard, the Silver Skulls, and the Firehawks. Seeing as the Manus Iri have been assembled by the High Lords of Terra themselves, again, deja vu, to pass their judgment upon the Malagant sector, the Inquisition themselves wouldn't be able to get access to those records even if they wanted to, meaning the names of the final 2 chapters will probably stay lost to time. Unless I fill them in myself. Ha! The Charnel Guard were also assembled to participate in the Angevin Crusade, which I lightly touched upon in my Carcharodons video. Alongside an overwhelming presence of Imperial Guard, Imperial Navy, and Titan legions, the Charnel Guard were tasked with the early expansion in what would become known as the Calixus sector. The Black Templar, Tigers Argent, and Sons of Medusa were their Astartes allies in this task, making them an important part of the sector's early history. The Charnel Guard are also members of the Triarchy, an alliance between the Charnel Guard, Angels Numinous, and the Red Seraphs. While this alliance was so deep that they even had their cool kid clubhouse password to start off their meetings with, it's noted that the other 2 chapters rarely saw eye to eye on most issues brought before the Triarchy, leaving the Charnel Guard forced to play mediator most of the time. One of their most notable alliances is probably being a member of the infamous Maelstrom Warders, the group of Space Marines tasked with guarding the Maelstrom who later tried to secede from the Imperium in the Badab War. This group were the Charnel Guard, Lamenters, of course, and Mantis Warriors under the command of the Astral Claws. Before the days of secession, when the Warders functioned as intended, the Charnel Guard were one of the 2 chapters tasked with striking at the renegade legions deep within the Maelstrom, the first Imperial effort to do so. They were partnered with their fellow Lamenters, an oddly appropriate alliance given their oddball status within the Sanguinary Brotherhood. As what was known as the Scourge campaign raged on with success, the Charnel Guard were suddenly pulled from the Crusade and reassigned to the Thanatos Crusade. This command was given from Holy Terra itself, leaving the Charnel Guard with little choice but to comply, allowing them to avoid having their loyalty called into question when the Badab War broke out. Most importantly, it left the Lamenters to do what the Lamenters do best. Now, while I really could keep going, as I haven't even touched on Zephan and his weird-ass Build-A-Bear cybernetic bizarre adventures featuring John Landrader, I hope I've got my point across here. The Charnel Guard are a pretty popular chapter, somehow called into multiple alliances in-universe, despite looking pretty similar to what they are purging most of the time. These days, the Charnel Guard focus their operations within the Imperium Nihilus after the Great Rift split Imperial territory in 2. Given that Lord Commander Dante of the Blood Angels was placed in charge of the Dark Imperium, yet they don't really see eye to eye with the Charnel Guard, it makes you wonder if the Guard saw to assist in their parent legion out of duty, or maybe to coax favor from the Lord. After all, the decision to do so was a group decision made by the Triarchy, but maybe they were in the area when the Great Rift opened, and it just happened to work out due to locational convenience. Or maybe Dante just told the Triarchy to fucking do it, and they were like, well, what are we gonna say, no? Yeah, try that out. See how it works for you guys. Building the Charnel Guard was fairly straightforward. I chose to use this Stern Guard veteran from the Leviathan box set, specifically this guy. At this point, I've looted more models from Leviathan than I've actually built, but yeah, whatever. In this batch of models, we don't have a nice power weapon yet, so I wanted to have a nice heroic pose with blade drawn. I had a resin copy of this Lieutenant, which includes this power sword bit I'm not going to use, so I stole it from my Charnel boy here. I attached it with some super glue, because plastic glue doesn't really do much to resin. I think that's by design. As for the left arm, I stole this plasma pistol arm from a spare sprue of Hellblasters I got in an eBay lot, and used it as is. So this here is a Blood Angels style jump pack that I 3D printed off of Cults 3D. I actually do have just regular Assault Squad jump packs available, but since I was printing these pauldrons and some other stuff, I figured I'd spend an extra $1 or $2 to get a nice jump pack, while I had the printer set up. If you don't have access to a 3D printer, you could totally loot the infamously god tier Sanguinary Guard kit, but getting hold of this chapter's pauldrons may be a little harder. I put a link in the description for a place to buy some STLs on the cheap, but the printerless folk in the crowd will probably have to troll around Etsy or ask a friend for the hookup. Speaking of pauldrons, I picked up this flamboyant ass Angel Pauldron STL online as well. It's a recreation of a pauldron that already exists, but since I had the printer up, it was cheaper and faster to just print it. And again, STLs are in the description. Now, while my plan was to just use this Stern Guard's Mark 7 helmet that he came with, I wanted to gussy it up a little bit. So I found this iron halo in one of my bits boxes and chopped it up to fit over the head. It's not exactly a Blood Angels helmet, but I think it invokes the vibe. Also, I know this was the perfect opportunity to use a bare head and show off their ghoulish visage, but I kind of forgot about it. I got really excited about sticking the iron halo to the helmet, and I just completely forgot. Sorry, Chief. It be how it be. Alright, so I have to preface the painting section with something. The Charnel Guard have an established color palette, as shown here on this Dreadnought. However, they don't have an established color distribution for their Marines. They've got the colors, but not where they go. For me, I'm going to try to match the Dreadnought with the maroon on the pauldrons, knee guards, and just as a little bit of leadership flair, the helmet. The Dreadnought also has red lenses, but I personally didn't like how the red blended into the maroon of the helmet, so I did change the eye lenses to an icy blue down the line, which also tied the color into the energy effects of the power sword and the plasma pistol. I did also mean to put this icy blue energy effect into the thruster of the power pack, but I forgot, so let's move on. In this obscure lore series, I've painted a lot of black armor. Like, a lot of black armor. Like most of my black armored minis that have come before, the Charnel Guard started from a coat of black primer. On top of this, I laid a base coat of dark gray to act as my black layer, as this will give me better color depth in the recesses of the armor when I put a wash on it all later. The dark gray gets dry brushed with a neutral gray, then a sky gray on the most extreme points and edges. When it comes to selecting these spots for Mark 10 armor, I usually try to hit the top of the helmet, the collar, the upper part of the pauldrons and the trim, kneecaps, fingers, and the toes. The toe may seem like an odd spot to define, but depending on your basing scheme, it can really help define the feet on a cluttered base. With the 27th quintillionth power armor I've painted in a good spot, I start to layer on the red, or more specifically maroon. Maroon is commonly confused with burgundy, and rightfully so, but the general tip between these mixes is that maroon is a reddy brown, while burgundy is a purpley red. I mixed a brown into my red and got to base coating the head, the pauldron fields, the kneecaps, and the big old angel wings. With all the base coatings for the maroon done, I used more poster tack to protect the black parts of the model from some dry brush highlights, which are just achieved with adding white into the maroon. I managed to get some pretty smooth highlights overall, and I was pretty happy with it, so on to the next step. For the random bits and bobs on the armor, I used a variety of colors. I used a sky gray on the tabard so I could put a small highlight of white on the raised areas. That same sky gray was used to quickly base coat the purity seals, with the plan down the line to tint them brown with a brown wash. White would have been a little bit better for this job, but this sky gray covered in like 2 coats, so it was very easy, didn't have to fuss with it at all. I also use a dark and neutral brown to pack out all of the leather bits like the holster. These could have stayed black, but if the armor is black, I like using brown to help differentiate it. With the bobs done, I break out that mithril blade to base coat the metals. I wrestled with the idea of where to put any gold on the mini, as the blood angels and their kin are known to be very gold and gaudy. However, not only did the scheme just kind of look better to me without the small gold ornamentations, but I like to think that it kind of helps set them apart as outcasts with their gene family. This was, however, not an original idea, as that logic was part of my decision to do almost the same thing for a custom chapter I made years ago for Kill Team, the Angel's Lament. You should go check them out after this if you're not bored. I really like them, but you ain't got it. That's cool. Whatever. I'm just gonna cry. When it came to washing the entire mini, I decided to use a diluted purple wash, in this case Druchii Violet, for multiple reasons. The Charnel Guard are stated to have black armor akin to volcanic glass. Looking on Google, my favorite references for volcanic glass were almost a deep purple, and I thought it would be cool to tint my black armor to suggest that. Also, the purple shade just looked really cool over that silver. It did have the side effect of pushing my maroon towards burgundy, but honestly, it's not too bad. I could have just not washed those sections or hit them with a brown later, but the color wasn't altered too much at the end of the day, and fuck it. All that was left was to paint the base, give it a rim job, and call it done. I know down the line I'm going to regret saying rim job, but whatever, I'm in it already. I love how this mini turned out in general. The highlights with the dry brush are so smooth, and the maroon just pops on this black field. Everything about it, man, it just works. It may not be my personal favorite of the batch, but in terms of execution and technique, this is just superb. Like, man, I knocked it out of the park with these dry brushes. With no concrete scheme, though, there are a multitude of ways you could interpret the coloring of this chapter. But you could easily use something like this as a baseline if you weren't looking to do anything funky with it. But yeah, I think it works. It's pretty much a direct copy of that Dreadnought, almost a 1-for-1. But hey, when you're extrapolating a color uniform out of a source material, sometimes, it's not super flashy. But anyways, I hope you guys like it as much as I do, and hopefully this will satiate that one bastard who haunts my comment section like a bad itch. Since the last video, we've had a couple new patrons join, kind of all on the same day too. I wasn't really expecting that, but I wanted to give a thanks to you guys real quick. Thank you to Zoe Monroe, Tech Scrolls, Mercurian Temple, Joshua Welt, and Spencer. All the support that you guys have been showing me really means a lot to me, and thank you to my patrons, and thank you to everybody just watching the video. Really, you don't need to be a patron. My content will always be free, but that doesn't mean I appreciate you guys any less, you know. It's just there's one of me and like 12,000 of you guys, you know. So, I mean, I would love to try to sit here and read through a list of them all, but, you know, I'd probably die. But yeah, thank you to all you guys for watching. Thank you for my patrons. If you like what I do here on the channel, and if you liked the Pentarchy of Blood series, I'd really appreciate any kind of interaction you'd like to give me, whether it's a comment or a subscription, whatever it is, even if it's just a view, thank you. Looking at the recent work on the channel, we've had a lot of Space Marines in general, either Loyalist or Chaos. Next time, I think we'll try to get a little bit away from them, just as a bit of a breather, you know. Don't get me wrong, I love some hot, sweaty dudes in metal, but, you know, it's good to take a break every once in a while. Until that video comes out, though, feel free to watch whatever is posted on screen here, or not, you know. I'm not going to force you. Thank you again, and I hope you have a good one.